Temperance, the angelic archetype and the psyche. Temperance doesn't shout, it whispers. And yet, that whisper carries the power to realign an entire life. In the 14th card of the major arcana, we meet a serene angel with one foot in the water and one on land, gently pouring liquid from one vessel to another. It's not just a pretty picture. It's a living symbol of harmony between realms, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious. The liquid that flows isn't ordinary water. It represents energy in motion, the refined elixir of transformation. This isn't about stillness, but rhythm, a dance between opposites. You've probably felt this in your own life, moments when everything just flows, not from control, but from balance. That's the domain of temperance. What most people miss is how this card channels the energy of Aquarius, the water bearer who brings vision and hope to dry land. It's the archetype of spiritual evolution meeting psychological insight. And here, water doesn't just symbolize emotion. It's the psychic current that runs beneath all transformation. The vessel in the angel's left hand often carries red liquid, fire, while the right receives blue water. Together, they create violet, the color of spiritual transmutation, crown chakra energy, the meeting of heaven and earth. Look at your own life. When have you been too much fire, too much water? When did balance feel impossible? This card offers a symbolic map back to that sacred center. But there's more. The angel is neither male nor female. It exists in sacred androgyny. The fusion of masculine and feminine isn't just a poetic idea, it's an energetic law. The yin and yang, the push and pull, the divine dance, all of it must come into rhythm if we are to evolve. You've seen this play out in relationships, right? One person trying to dominate, the other retreating. But when both energies learn to pour into each other, something transcendent happens. That's what the angel teaches, not control, but integration. Not power over, but power with. And don't overlook the background. A glowing sun rises between two mountains, reminding us of the eternal cycle, death, rebirth, awakening. The winding path that begins at the water's edge leads directly to that light, symbolizing the journey of the soul guided by divine order. The angel doesn't block the path, it blesses it. Every time you feel stuck, consider, are you ignoring divine rhythm? Are you resisting the process because it doesn't look like progress? That golden light is always waiting, but only the patient and the present can walk that path. Temperance whispers again, you don't need to burn or drown. You can become the water and the flame. It invites you to play with the ingredients of your life like an alchemist, balancing work with rest, solitude with connection, structure with spontaneity. Try this. Reflect on one area of your life that feels out of sync. Is it your time? Your emotions? Your purpose? Imagine the angel pouring new energy into that space. That's how the transformation begins. And what comes next? Well, it's not just about harmony. It's about the inner messenger that arrives once harmony takes root. Symbolism of temperance in the tarot. Temperance isn't just a card. It's an encounter with a heavenly messenger who knows your soul better than you do. This angel doesn't descend to punish or preach, but to bridge the split within. It's the archetype of divine guidance that walks beside the seeker, pouring from one vessel to another not only to balance energies, but to awaken the psyche to its true harmony. In Jungian terms, this angel functions as a mediator between the conscious and the unconscious, making what is hidden gently rise into awareness. It doesn't shout your wounds, it translates them into wisdom. That's how inner transformation begins, with a whisper, not a war. Now think of this angel as more than symbolic. Imagine it as a part of you. It's the force that nudges you when your intuition speaks, but you hesitate. It's what guides you to journal your dreams, to follow a hunch, to sit quietly with discomfort instead of numbing it. The angelic archetype appears in moments of synchronicity, when the world outside reflects exactly what you're feeling inside. You run into an old friend after thinking of them for days. That's not chance, it's inner alignment whispering through the outer world. This is how divine guidance moves, subtly, rhythmically, always nudging you toward integration. And here's something profound. The angel is always holding space for opposites to meet. It doesn't erase polarity. It teaches how to hold both without collapsing. Have you ever tried to be both strong and vulnerable? Logical and intuitive? It's tough, right? But that's the exact inner dialogue Temperance is here to guide. Through grace, it invites a new type of listening, one that makes peace with the paradox instead of trying to fix it. That's the secret to soulful balance. The moment you allow both your fire and your doubt to coexist, the alchemy begins. This archetype also plays a crucial role in deep shadow work. When we face the unconscious, it's easy to feel overwhelmed or fragmented. But the angel brings harmony not through force, but through presence. Its wings don't carry you away. They shelter the inner process while you become whole again. If you're working through inner conflict, therapy, meditation, self-inquiry, consider inviting this archetype in. Light a candle, breathe deeply, visualize the angel pouring light between your thoughts. You don't need to understand everything. You need only to trust the rhythm of internal grace. In spiritual terms, this angelic presence is the living mandala of inner guidance. It's the moving geometry of transformation. It's what artists feel when they paint without knowing why, what mystics sense when they fast or retreat into silence. The angel is not separate from you. It's the part of you that remembers divine order even when the ego is lost in chaos. And as this presence becomes more familiar, it begins preparing you for a deeper dance, one where opposites stop clashing and begin co-creating. Alchemical themes and spiritual integration. Alchemy wasn't just medieval chemistry, it was a sacred language for inner transformation. And in the Temperance card, the act of pouring becomes the central ritual of divine alchemy. We're not just watching water move from one cup to another. We're witnessing the fusion of polarities, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious. This process, known as the magnum opus, isn't about turning lead into gold. It's about turning chaos into coherence. And that starts when you stop rejecting parts of yourself and start blending them with intention. That's the secret behind real integration. The ancient alchemists spoke in riddles, the blood of the lion, the gluten of the eagle. What were they really talking about? Not physical ingredients, but psychic forces. The lion's blood symbolizes fiery will, raw libido, the drive to conquer. The eagle's gluten, that's the spiritual glue, the expansive vision that lifts us above instinct. When Temperance pours, it brings these two into a sacred marriage. In practical terms, it means using your ambition, lion, without losing your soul, eagle. Want an example? Working hard to grow your business and taking spiritual retreats, that's alchemy in action. The fusion in this card also reflects the healing of emotional extremes. Many people live like pendulums, swinging between burnout and numbness, overexertion and avoidance. Temperance offers another way, rhythm instead of reaction. This isn't about erasing passion or stillness, but about learning when to stir the cauldron and when to let it simmer. If your relationships feel explosive, or your work-life balance feels like a war zone, it might be time to ask, what am I overpouring, and what have I let dry up? That's the alchemical question, and only you can answer it, cup by symbolic cup. In this sense, the angel becomes the alchemist, not fixing you, but showing you how to work your own fire and water. Through daily rituals, reflection, and intuitive action, you're already practicing this inner blending. Cooking with intention, dancing to release tension, writing poetry from your pain, these are all forms of divine alchemy. You don't need a lab coat. You need presence. That's why spiritual practices aren't just for monks or mystics. They're for anyone ready to turn inner conflict into soulful art. And here's the twist. The more you integrate, the more mysterious life becomes. The angel never gives full explanations, only invitations. You might start seeing signs, hearing messages in dreams, feeling drawn to strange symbols or recurring numbers. That's because once you begin the great work, life starts to speak in symbolic imagery. And what comes next? Well, let's just say this journey isn't only psychological, it's deeply, wildly, irreversibly spiritual. Psychological interpretation according to Jung. Carl Jung didn't just decode dreams, he gave us a map of the soul, and temperance fits beautifully within it. In Jungian psychology, the process of individuation, becoming whole, hinges on one essential act: integrating the unconscious with the conscious. And that's precisely what the angel in Temperance does. It doesn't destroy the darkness or glorify the light. It pours one into the other, gradually, lovingly, until something new is born. Jung would call this the emergence of the self, the totality that lives beyond the ego's tiny fortress. The angel here becomes a personification of insight, a guide appearing when the ego is mature enough to let go of control. If you've ever had a powerful realization in therapy, during a psychedelic journey, or in the middle of heartbreak, that moment when something deeper took over, you've met this archetype. Jung said that transformation requires a psychic gradient, a flow between energy poles. Temperance shows us how to locate and navigate that gradient. Not by force, but by attunement. Like adjusting a radio dial, it's about finding the frequency where soul and psyche can speak. In real life, this might look like reconciling with a parent not by confrontation, but through compassion, or healing your ambition not by crushing it, but by channeling it into a purpose greater than ego. Jung believed the psyche speaks in symbols, and every conflict is an opportunity for decoding. So if you've been triggered lately, or obsessed with a recurring theme, it's not random. It's your unconscious knocking. The angel of Temperance doesn't answer that door for you, but it shows you how to listen for the knock. Jung also believed in active imagination, a technique where you dialogue with parts of yourself. You can do this in meditation, through writing, or even drawing. Imagine sitting across from your inner critic or wounded child and asking what it wants to teach you. The angel in Temperance would be the one facilitating that meeting, holding the space where shame and grace can finally speak. That's what integration looks like, not resolution but conversation. And through this conversation, energy that was once trapped becomes available for spiritual evolution. As the individuation journey deepens, Temperance becomes a mirror of your psychic progress. You begin to notice moments where your reactions soften, where your choices reflect balance instead of compulsion. That's the angel's subtle hand at work. But don't be fooled, the work is just beginning. Because the more you integrate, the more layers arise, calling for deeper healing, deeper awareness, deeper grace. The flow of libido and spiritual rebirth. In Jungian terms, libido isn't just sexual energy, it's the raw fuel of the psyche, the vital current that drives all desire, creation, and transformation. When we look at Temperance, we see that very flow being redirected. After the death of the ego, often symbolized by previous cards like death or the hanged man, something profound happens. Energy is no longer wasted on defense, projection, or fear. It's now available for rebirth. The white liquid poured by the angel becomes the image of purified libido, now aligned with a greater spiritual current. Think about it. How much energy have you lost trying to control everything? Trying to please others, prove your worth, or silence your inner doubts? All of that drains libido. But when you stop fighting and begin to trust the flow, the same energy becomes creativity, insight, and courage. That's the promise of this card, the rebirth of psychic energy after internal surrender. Real-life example? Someone who goes through a breakup and instead of collapsing, channels that pain into starting a new business, writing a book, or deepening their spiritual path. That's temperance in action. The key is not forcing the flow, but honoring its rhythm. Libido doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in spirals, cycles, waves. And when the psyche is ready, it redirects this current toward the self, toward individuation. The angel knows exactly how much to pour and when. This teaches us to stop over-efforting. Some days, you need to act boldly. Other days, you need to sit in silence and let the deeper waters stir. If you're feeling blocked lately, ask yourself, am I trying to swim upstream? Because often, rebirth comes only when we let go of the old current. This renewed libido also awakens the third eye, the inner vision that sees beyond surface reality. Once the inner energy is no longer fragmented, it begins illuminating your path with clarity and precision. You might find yourself suddenly understanding dreams, feeling more intuitive, or sensing guidance where there was once confusion. That's not magic, it's inner alignment. When the ego steps aside, the self steps in, and the libido starts dancing with meaning instead of chaos. From that place, even your past wounds become sacred fuel. And so, as the angel pours, you begin to feel something stir, not in your mind, but in your soul. A new vitality, not frantic but steady. A new purpose, not imposed but revealed. That's the birth of sacred energy, resurrected from inner death. And as it starts to flow, it prepares you for the next great symbol on this journey, one that redefines how we understand polarity, movement, and the infinite dance of opposites. Duality and the symbol of the lemniscate. The lemniscate, that sideways figure eight, isn't just a pretty symbol floating above the magician's head. It's the eternal loop of duality, the infinite cycle of birth and rebirth, tension and resolution that pulses through the psyche. In Temperance, this symbol returns in a new form, no longer floating, but embodied in the very act of pouring. It's no longer just an abstract idea. It becomes fluid, active, transformed. The lemniscate here is open, not sealed. And that openness is everything. It means the opposites have stopped circling each other and started truly exchanging energy. In The Magician, the lemniscate represents potential, raw, untamed power waiting to be mastered. But in Temperance, that power has matured. Now it's no longer about control, but about conscious participation. This shift mirrors what we go through in life. First, we try to dominate everything with willpower. Eventually, we realize we have to dance with life, not wrestle it. That's when the flow begins. Think of the difference between trying to force a relationship to work versus cultivating real connection. One loops endlessly, the other pours. This transformation of the lemniscate is also deeply psychological. Jung showed us that the ego and the unconscious must be in constant dialogue. But when the ego tries to suppress the unconscious, we get neurosis, anxiety, burnout. The open lemniscate in Temperance suggests a matured psyche, one that allows energy to move both ways. Instead of bottling up rage, we explore it. Instead of hiding from sorrow, we express it through art or ritual. And when we do that, we stop repeating patterns. We evolve. We begin creating from a higher frequency. You've probably felt this shift yourself without knowing the symbol. Those moments when instead of reacting to pain, you pause and ask, what is this trying to teach me? or when a challenge arises and instead of spiraling, you feel strangely calm, as if some deeper current has taken over. That's the lemniscate opening. That's divine alchemy at work within your nervous system, realigning the flow of psychic energy through balance instead of blockage. And the more you trust it, the more effortless life becomes. This evolution of the lemniscate sets the stage for an even deeper rhythm, one that moves not in static loops, but in embodied, sacred motion. We're no longer stuck between extremes. We begin to flow through them. And that movement, that dance between polarities, is exactly where the tarot journey starts to pick up a new kind of grace, the rhythm of healing made visible. Movement, dance, and rhythmic flow in the tarot. In the tarot, stillness has its place, but rhythm is where transformation lives. Temperance introduces this shift beautifully. The gentle flow of water between vessels isn't random. It has tempo, cadence, a kind of spiritual choreography. This is not the rigid structure of moral law or dogma. This is divine movement. When you look closely, the angel isn't frozen. It's poised in mid-action, like a dancer between steps. And that says something powerful. Evolution happens not in the extremes, but in the flow between them. That's where real grace is found. This idea is echoed in the progression of the major arcana. Earlier cards often depict static postures, the emperor seated in authority, the hierophant anchored in doctrine. But temperance? It's motion incarnate. And this motion isn't chaotic, it's precise, intentional, like a musician playing in perfect time. If you've ever been in a yoga flow or a deep breathwork session, you've touched this rhythm. It's the same vibration that pulses through ritual dance, through chanting, through the silence between thoughts. This is the frequency of healing, and it's felt, not taught. Consider how this applies in daily life. When you're caught in stress, everything feels rigid, your body, your mind, even your breath. But when you move with intention, whether it's dancing, walking in nature, or cooking with love, you re-enter the rhythm of the psyche. That's temperance in action. A simple way to invite this energy in: create rituals that include movement, not as a performance, but as prayer. Try swaying with your breath, drumming your fingers to a mantra, or letting your body move freely to ambient music. Let rhythm become a spiritual language. Temperance also points toward what's coming, the final cards of the tarot, especially the world. In that card, we see a figure fully immersed in dance, encircled by a laurel wreath, harmonizing with all the elements. But the preparation for that mastery happens here. In Temperance, we're learning how to feel rhythm before we can become rhythm. The angel teaches us that spiritual evolution isn't linear. It moves in spirals, syncopations, pauses, and crescendos. And the more we attune to this, the more effortlessly we glide through life's shifting melodies. This rhythmic awareness isn't just personal, it's archetypal. It's what indigenous cultures knew long before psychology named it. Healing circles, trance dances, sweat lodges, all of them invoke rhythm to rewire the psyche. Temperance carries that ancestral memory, and as you feel its flow, you begin to understand. Rhythm isn't something you create, it's something you remember. And once remembered, it leads you directly into the deeper mysteries of feminine wisdom and sacred receptivity. The role of feminine energies in the journey. If you've paid attention to the tarot's middle row, the cards between the Chariot and the Devil, you'll notice something curious. There's a subtle shift toward feminine or androgynous figures, especially in cards like Strength, Justice, and Temperance. That's not a coincidence. This stretch of the journey demands internal work, and it's the feminine principle that knows how to guide that. Not feminine as gender, but as energy, intuitive, receptive, cyclical. It's the current that teaches us to feel instead of force, to receive instead of control. Temperance embodies this beautifully. The angel isn't commanding or conquering, it's blending, listening, harmonizing. This is the sacred feminine in motion, moving with grace instead of domination. And we see this same energy in real life through practices that honor flow: meditation, journaling, sacred bathing, intuitive dancing. These aren't just wellness trends, they're doorways to the feminine psyche. When someone lights a candle and sits in silence to reflect on their day, they're invoking this energy. And in that space, wisdom flows without words. The reason this matters is because most of us were taught to value the masculine quest: clarity, logic, achievement. But when the soul starts stirring, those tools begin to fail. We hit walls, burn out, or feel hollow despite success. That's when the feminine knocks, not to fix, but to soften, to show us how to hold paradox, to teach us that rest is productive, and that insight often comes through surrender. If you've ever felt guilty for slowing down or doubting yourself in a world that rewards nonstop hustle, you've felt this conflict firsthand. In myth and psychology, the feminine is often the one who initiates the hero's descent into the underworld, not as punishment, but as invitation. Think of Inanna, Persephone, even Eve. All entered a space of shadow to emerge transformed. Temperance echoes this role. The angel doesn't rush you toward enlightenment. It prepares you, gently balancing energies so that when darkness comes, you're rooted. If you've ever done shadow work, or simply allowed yourself to cry without shame, you've already walked with this guide. And here's the beauty: this feminine wisdom doesn't cancel the masculine. It tempers it. It invites integration. And as this balance deepens, you start to feel something shift, a new way of being that doesn't reject doing, but no longer needs it to prove worth. From this inner equilibrium, your journey takes on a new hue. And with that hue, you're almost ready to rediscover virtues not as rules, but as pathways to healing. Temperance and the cardinal virtues. Temperance didn't get its name from a lucky guess. It's one of the 4 cardinal virtues that shaped medieval and philosophical thinking for centuries. Alongside fortitude, prudence, and justice, temperance was seen as a pillar of moral character. But here's what most people miss. It's not just about moderation in the sense of self-restraint. In the tarot, temperance goes far deeper. It becomes a spiritual balancing act, not just between pleasures and responsibilities, but between entire planes of being. We're talking about the fusion of ego and self, of heaven and earth, of impulse and insight. This card doesn't preach abstinence, it models mastery. And in that sense, it turns the old moral view on its head. It's not about denying your desires. It's about learning how to transform them into something sacred. Take anger, for example. Instead of repressing it, which leads to explosions, or acting it out, which creates chaos, temperance would suggest asking, what truth is my anger protecting? That small shift turns raw emotion into spiritual data. And that's a virtue in action, not a rule you follow, but a rhythm you embody. The same applies to modern life. Think about technology. Scrolling endlessly through social media might be numbing your intuition, while cutting it off completely might isolate you. Temperance would guide you to find a ritual in the use, to consume mindfully, to create intentionally, to disconnect regularly. That's how ancient virtue becomes modern wisdom. You don't need to wear a robe and quote philosophers to live a virtuous life. You just need to listen, align, and choose with awareness. In Jungian terms, temperance is the virtue that supports individuation. It teaches the psyche to self-regulate, to hold tension without collapsing, to let contradictory truths coexist without panic. It's the virtue that supports shadow work, because it gives you the inner container to face what's raw, without needing to flee or fix. If you've ever sat in discomfort until clarity emerged, or resisted the urge to numb out and instead journaled through the storm, you've practiced temperance, not the watered-down version, but the cardinal force that changes lives. And here's the twist: this virtue is alive. It breathes, pulses, shifts with you. It's not static like a rule book, it's dynamic like a ritual. And once you start seeing it this way, you begin to sense its deeper function, not to make you behave, but to help you become. And in that becoming, another kind of healing begins, one that doesn't just balance, but reweaves the soul into something sacred. Sacred union and divine healing. Temperance isn't just about balance, it's about sacred union. The kind that doesn't just feel peaceful, but feels holy. When the angel pours one element into another, it's reenacting a cosmic ritual, the marriage of the celestial and the earthly, of the fragmented self into wholeness. This card reminds us that true healing doesn't come from fixing a part of us, it comes from embracing all parts as necessary ingredients in the great work. That's what divine healing looks like. Not sterilized perfection, but soulful integration. Imagine your life as a chalice, one side filled with your light, the other with your pain. Most people either try to dump the pain or ignore the light. Temperance teaches you to pour one into the other until both become medicine. This isn't sentimental, it's sacred alchemy. Real healing happens when you sit with grief and allow grace to mingle with it. When you let love touch your rage. Think about the moments when you cried not out of despair, but because something sacred was breaking through. That's the angel at work. This sacred blending often shows up in relationships, but not the romantic fantasy kind. We're talking about soul encounters, where someone mirrors both your beauty and your wounds. These relationships can be challenging, but they're also initiatory. Temperance asks, can you meet another without losing yourself? Can you stay open in love without collapsing in fear? If so, you're already walking the path of sacred union, one that leads not to perfect harmony, but to conscious resonance. Jung referred to this union as the Konjunktio, the merging of opposites within the psyche that brings the ego closer to the self. In myth, it's the wedding of heaven and earth, of spirit and body. And in practice, it might look like reconciling your ambition with your need for rest, your independence with your craving for connection. It's not about choosing sides, it's about letting them touch. You can light incense and still pay your bills. You can chant mantras and set boundaries. That's divine integration. As the angel keeps pouring, something new begins to form, not just healing, but a rebirth of your identity through grace. You start realizing that healing isn't an event, it's a lifestyle. It's how you speak to yourself in the dark, how you show up on the days you feel least worthy. And from that place of sacred rhythm, a new horizon begins to shimmer. Not one of escape, but of realization that what you've been seeking might already be blooming from within. Transition toward illumination and enlightenment. Temperance doesn't just soothe, it initiates. It's the hidden doorway between the turbulent middle row of the tarot and the luminous upper realm where realization begins. After passing through moral conflict, loss, and inner trials, the seeker arrives at this card not as a novice, but as someone ready. Ready to step into a new vibrational frequency where wisdom is no longer something you chase, it's something you embody. Temperance is the quiet gatekeeper to illumination, the angel who whispers, "You're not broken, you're being refined." The rhythm established here isn't random, it's preparation. The psyche has been softened by conflict and cracked open by shadow. Now it can receive the light without shattering. Think of it like tempering steel. The blade is forged by fire, but it becomes resilient only when cooled in perfect rhythm. That's what this card does. It stabilizes the soul's heat, so it can carry divine voltage without burning out. You've felt this before, those calm moments after a storm, when clarity floods in without force. That's the angel's grace. In spiritual traditions, this transition is often referred to as the beginning of awakening. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the subtle awareness that your life is more than cause and effect. You start noticing patterns, synchronicities, the deeper meaning behind your struggles, the roles people play in your growth, and you begin to ask better questions like, what am I here to integrate? Or how is this pain part of my evolution? This is where psychology and mysticism shake hands, where the map of the psyche turns into the path of the soul. Jung believed that illumination arises not by bypassing the unconscious, but by integrating it. Temperance is that integration made visible. The third eye begins to flicker open here, not as a mystical trick, but as inner vision. You see not just what's happening, but why. You begin to trust timing. You feel held by something larger. And this awareness isn't passive, it asks for action. You're being prepared to embody the light you once searched for in others. But the journey doesn't end in the light. In fact, as the angel fades, a darker archetype approaches, not as a villain, but as the next great teacher. Because illumination must be tested. And the devil, who waits just ahead, is no monster. He's the unintegrated shadow that will demand everything you've just learned, and more. Preparation for the encounter with darkness. Temperance is the inhale before the plunge, the deep breath that steadies the soul before it meets the abyss. In the tarot's unfolding, this card sits right before the devil, a deliberate placement. The angel appears not to reward you, but to prepare you. Because once balance is achieved, the next test always comes. Not to undo your growth, but to deepen it. The devil isn't the enemy, it's the unconscious in raw form, the parts of yourself that haven't yet been blessed by the angel's grace. And without the preparation Temperance offers, that encounter can shatter instead of awaken. This card, then, is a moment of pause soaked in meaning. The calm isn't accidental, it's sacred. The waters have settled, the inner elements are in dialogue, and the psyche is ready to descend without losing itself. This is what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites, the ability to remain centered while chaos beckons. If you've ever walked into a tough conversation, a triggering memory, or a tempting distraction and chosen presence over panic, that was Temperance living through you. And that strength will be crucial in what lies ahead. The devil archetype brings with it addiction, projection, illusion. Everything you once disowned now walks toward you in chains. But thanks to Temperance, you now carry an inner rhythm that resists collapse. You've learned the difference between reacting and responding, between suppression and integration. This preparation isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause. It's the quiet knowing that says, "You've seen your light, now can you hold it in the dark?" That's spiritual maturity. That's what this angel trains you for. On a personal level, you'll feel this when life tests your balance. You've meditated for weeks, and suddenly you're triggered by an old wound. You've cultivated self-love, and then run into someone who mirrors every insecurity. This isn't failure. It's initiation. The grace you've built through Temperance becomes your anchor. The rhythm you've practiced becomes your heartbeat. You stop fearing the devil not because he's weak, but because you're no longer afraid of your own shadow. And so the angel fades, not in absence, but in trust. You've been prepared. You've remembered your own sacred rhythm. Now you step into the next chapter, not as someone seeking light, but as someone who carries it. And in that descent, a new kind of transformation awaits, one forged not by purity, but by presence.